And welcome inside the Sports Guys Podcast.com. Of course, it's a grand slam of sports and music, always right there on the YouTube channel and at that very website presented by our friends over at Bangtail Whiskey, our friends at MitchMax.com and Hank Jr. Productions. Appreciate all the work that our sponsors do out there. Of course, the countdown to kickoff's coming up August 26th. The Vider Pirates at the Silsbee Tigers. CajunCountryRadio.com is where you can hear yours truly, Robbie Lynn, and our good friend and sound engineer Kevin Mercado. Speaking of good friends, we met about 3 years ago when I first started this thing. I always love his work. He's one of the best sports broadcasters in the business and somebody I've always idolized with great work out there and great takes on Major League Baseball, the NBA, NFL. If it's a sport, he knows it and you love it. My good friend and New York Mets fan, Casey Stern, joins the SportsGuysPodcast.com. Case, what's up, man?
What's up, Brandon? How you doing, man?
It's been good, brother. It's been a weird week because, I noticed a lot of people, and we're talking a lot Major League Baseball post-trade deadline today, but a lot of people were on Twitter and seeing who was going to break the stories first. Was it Mark Feinsand? Was it Kid Rosenthal? What trades were going to happen, when they were going to happen. I want to get to that here in a little bit, but, man, I've got to start right here because we lost an iconic announcer this week. 67 years, Case, with the Los Angeles Dodgers, Brooklyn and Los Angeles. And Vin Scully, and just talking about this, just goosebumps went up and down my arm and my spine because I've got to start right here. Just give me, and I grew up listening to all the greats with Vin Scully and, of course, Milo Hamilton and so many great announcers out there. Give me some of your best memories of Vin Scully and how he will be remembered for you as a sports broadcaster.
Well, for me, from the fan side, I grew up an 80s Mets fan. So, the ball gets by the bag and night rounds third and the Mets win it is something that certainly I remember for a long time with the Buckner call. Vin Scully, I was saying this to somebody the other day. It's pretty amazing because in the world of social media nowadays, and it's to an extreme, you can't find anything that is universally liked by everyone. I mean, now if you were to put out there, and I think about we both love music, the Beatles, doesn't matter if it's your kind of music or not. Somebody's going to tell you, I don't like the Beatles or they're overrated just because it's 2022. Look at what the reaction was nationally and across the board everywhere from people when they heard Vin passed. It's amazing just how much love outpoured from everybody. There wasn't a single soul that wasn't touched by the guy in some way or another. And the thing to me that was always most amazing about Vin is we always remember these iconic calls, and they are, right? And there's so many of them. Kirk Gibson, right? Hank Aaron. But you could turn on, and I lived in LA for 3 years, a long time ago, but you could turn on the TV or the radio, and it could be May 8th in some series nobody even cares about against a team that's terrible. And he makes it a story, makes it interesting, teaches you about the players, teaches you about the game. And it's funny because a lot of the pieces that were sent out kind of, I think, really described exactly what to me symbolized the best thing about Vin, which was how much he let the game breathe. I mean, after the Kirk Gibson homer, he doesn't talk for a minute and 8 seconds. There's the story that really gave me chills, which I didn't even know, but Vern Lundquist, and I posted on my Twitter, talking about that, we all remember the famous Milo call after the Hank Aaron homer, but here's Vin Scully. Vin, after Hank Aaron hit the home run, in the booth, he turned his body away from the field to force himself not to give in to the desire to say anything. And he didn't speak for 3 minutes because he understood that anybody that was listening, everybody was feeling that moment and what it meant. Nothing he could say was going to do what that moment would do for itself. That's the essence of the guy. I mean, the guy had no broadcast partner. Mm-hmm. I mean, you got to be kidding me. I mean, it's amazing. He literally, he's a one of one. He's the greatest play-by-play broadcaster in the history of sports, for sure.
Amazing. A great voice, and my condolences go out to his family. 94 years old, a full life, and I tell you, man,
full life.
And like you said, Case, the best thing to do is to paint a picture for a major league broadcast. And I have done play-by-play in my years for high school sports and some college sports around here in Texas. But I can tell you, it's hard to do it without a good wingman. But he did it to the best of his ability for 67 years for the Brooklyn and Los Angeles Dodgers. Amazingly done. Hey, let's get into this trade deadline because I know, like you, most fans were on Twitter, kind of what's the next move? Who's going to report this? Who's going to come out on top? What surprised you the most, and what team improved themselves for the stretch run now?
Well, I think going backwards, it's you can't not say the Padres. It's like the given,
Sure.
but I mean they improved themselves the most because they added not just Soto but Josh Bell and also Josh Hader and Brandon Drury, who of course hits a grand slam in his first at bat with them. Of course he does. I mean, I was thinking, well, Cincinnati and that park to Petco, that's a big difference. No, it doesn't seem to matter. No problem. Hit a grand slam. So it was no issue. They improved themselves the most. I think, what's a couple of things surprised me. Number one, the teams that did nothing, like the Colorado Rockies, I don't think know that they play a sport. Like I don't know what they're doing. It's like they've punted the sport like you punt the season. They punted everything. What a disaster, right? I mean, imagine being a Rockies fan. That's a great city and a great park. And I remember being there for the Tulo chance back in 2007. Imagine like you lose Story and Arenado, and like now literally they did nothing. The Chicago White Sox, the Tony La Russa infatuation, and what's happened there with Jerry Reinsdorf and that team not doing anything. The Mets, I think, surprising because to me, you don't need a big name, but I would have liked to see them get a left-handed relief pitcher. I think they needed one, and they didn't, it's odd only because, Brandon, that wouldn't have cost them. Francisco Alvarez, they don't have to give up their top prospects to go get him. So a lefty, I don't understand why that didn't happen. And I guess the last thing for me, which we'll learn kind of more as we go, the reasons why some of the teams dropped out of the Soto race. Like the Cardinals, Dylan Carlson, if that's really the reason they wouldn't get Juan Soto, I can't figure that out at all. And John Mozeliak's had some egg on the face in a lot of different ways, I think, the last number of years. That doesn't make any sense to me. So, that'll kind of bear fruit, I think, as we hear more about it. But look, the Padres stole the show. It's the biggest deal we've ever seen at a deadline in terms of amount of perceived talent that was sent in the deal. There's no guarantees what Abrams and Wood and Hassel and those guys become, but that's a lot of talent they sent that way to DC for sure.
Yeah, I think Mike Rizzo, I guess, handled it the best he could, front office and general manager for the Washington Nationals, to bring in that haul, Casey, because you talk about that, the biggest trade in Major League Baseball history there for the prospects that went back, and, of course, Luke Voigt kind of filling that void that Eric Hosmer had the right to do the no-trade clause to go to Boston at the time. But, you look at this, too, at the same time, trying to rebuild an organization. You look at some teams that are going to be good over the next 3 to 5 years, and if you can't say the Cincinnati Reds farm system, the Padres – and, of course, the Miami Marlins. And there are others out there, too, for some teams that the Nationals included, for teams that are trying to rebuild. So that's the hardest thing, I think, to do, is to determine who's going to be buyers and sellers at the deadline. And, of course, this year, getting it now, just the non-waiver deadline up until August 2nd, not having a waiver deadline now. Of course, some players can still be signed through getting designated for assignment by their teams and things like that. And other major league teams can look at ways to acquire them. But without the waiver deadline this year, it really puts general managers kind of back against the wall to say, man, we got to decide if we're going to be buyers and sellers. And if we get something that we feel is of value, we got to pull the trigger, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I remember in 2017, I have to remind you, but I'm still getting the champagne out of my eyes that Jeff Luna was dousing in my face when, he was telling me that he was sick of hearing me say on the air that I needed to see them get Verlander. I'd say the Astros would be a first-round exit if they didn't, and they would have. But they had the waiver deadline, and remember, Dallas Keuchel complained, why didn't we do anything? And they waited till 11 hours and 59th minute and 59th second, maybe even then some, in the waiver deadline, but got Verlander. Imagine what would be the case if they didn't now with the 4-year run that he's had. I think it puts more pressure. I would like to see them do something like that in the free agent season. I think the way that the NBA and the NHL do it, to be honest with you, is it's a coup because they overtake the world for it's only 48 hours, right? Everybody knows these deals are getting made before the moratoriums are lifted. But for 48 hours, if you're an NBA fan, everybody's signing and one after the other. If winter meetings was like that, I don't even know how many winter meetings. And the shows are great because you're interviewing all these people. Nothing happens. Nothing. Because it's the beginning of the process. You have the first meetings. If you were to just like taking the waiver deadline off, take away that this training wheels and cut that gap down of the amount of time that I have to make a deal and not start for.
We're losing there. Hopefully getting back here. That's he's the host of the Unfiltered podcast. There we go. Got you back. We got you back. You're good. It's got there he is.
Sorry. I had
We're good?
I had a phone call. I think it was Walgreens. I told them that right now I'm prescribed for this interview. Excuse me. So we're good. But yeah, but I think it would be way better if we cut the gap down in time for free agency and force more deals to occur the way that the waiver deadline did here. Yeah, for sure.
I'll tell you, speaking of the Astros case, 3 big moves down here for us here near Houston. Bringing a guy like Trey Mancini, just one of the class acts of baseball. Of course, everybody knows the story he went through, cancer survivor too, and of course the training staff and all the medical fields and hospitals and training staff in Baltimore to see this guy get through a full recovery. Bringing him into Houston, getting some pieces now, some insurance policies. Not sure of the situation with Michael Brantley and his shoulder. Will Smith coming in. I'll take a flyer on that. Odorizzi's kind of been up and down the entire year, so good to see. Change of scenery is sometimes good for players. I think one of the bigger ones could be, and I know Maldonado had a great July with a great month there too, but Christian Vasquez to me was a key one for them to get extra support and a guy hitting 280, a catcher that can handle himself, both calling a game case and also with the bat. Assess Houston's moves and kind of the journey they're going to have down the stretch here. Of course, we're nowhere going to win the West, no doubt about that. But what are these moves? How do they impact the playoffs?
Yeah, look, I think Vasquez was huge. Here's a guy who's got experience, who's been a World Series champion, who has been a backstop, who knows how to call games in those kind of spots. Maldonado is such a well-liked guy and a leader there. And I go back to even the situation with Dusty, with Greinke on the mound and trusting him because Maldonado tells him when he gets to the mound, he's not done yet. And Greinke goes and gets the outs in that postseason spot. There's a certain level of trust you need with a veteran catcher. I think having 2 of them and now having a guy like Vasquez was very helpful. I love the Mancini move. I didn't see it for Houston, honestly. The Mets and some other teams were in there. I didn't think that was going to be a play for them. I know that they had looked at Josh Bell. Certainly a switch hitting catcher would have been more valuable, but also would have cost more. The Gurriel situation and the need from the right side to have a bat was clearly there. The defense is, he's not Keith Hernandez, right? So this is certainly not the case. And not to do a Met thing, he's not Mark Teixeira, for example, right? But I think Mancini was a valuable add. And the Will Smith thing, look, in living in Atlanta and watching Will Smith here, he was terrible this year, really bad. But this is a guy who was great in the postseason a year ago, has been on 2 or 3 different teams. And the Astros are the kings of, I will find a way to make you pitch better because I have all the different guys and a great pitching coach and all of that. So I thought they did really well. They had to because the Yankees were busy. The Yankees with Benintendi, the Yankees losing out on Castillo, which they were involved in, but then getting Frankie Montas, right? Getting Trevino, getting Efros. I thought the Yankees did a really nice job. And with no offense to anyone else in the American League, it is so clearly a 2-team race. And baseball's not that way, as you and I both know. But I think it's going to be difficult. You'd be hard-pressed to believe anyone else is in the ALCS other than those 2 teams. I mean, I think if you're looking for great odds, you're not going there. But if you're looking for, hey, let me tell you what's really going to happen, we all know that matchup is coming. And I think the Astros knew that, the Yankees were retooling and they were building, and I gotta answer that. And I thought they did a good job with it. I did. Yeah.
And obviously, as you've said, and we talked here at the top, best moves, of course, Juan Soto, Josh Bell, AJ Preller on the clock over these last 3 or 4 years to pull the triggers, to do what he's done. I used to work for the Padres organization in San Antonio for the AA team out there too. And we saw, like I said, guys come through drafts as they happen to as well. And guys get assigned to the AA affiliate, come and go the way baseball is. But also I'll tell you this, great job as a general manager to go out with a scouting department and of course, analytical department, assess talent and bring it back in and not be afraid, as you've used this before. And I'm going to use it right now. You know where I'm going with this. Prospects are cool. Parades are cooler. Parades are a lot better, which is amazingly, you use that on the national scene for a lot of years. But I've always been the kind of myself too, having worked in baseball and listened to a lot of national radio and having been in the media for my 20-year career, that as a GM, you get hired to do that job to make your ball club get one thing. And at the end of the year, Casey, it's all about that World Series trophy. And I'm hoping for San Diego fans, and I watched that game the other night, for the Padre fans, 43,000 packing a stadium for the first time in years at Petco Park. You got to be happy for Padre fans.
Oh, without a doubt. And this is a different scenario. The last time I was this happy for Padre fans was at winter meetings when years ago they got Matt Kemp and Yasmani Grandal and those guys. They thought that did not work out as well. Justin Upton. This I think will be different. The thing that I think people need to realize is, 2 things. One, it's not just about this year. because they're not going to beat the Dodgers in the division this year. And you're hampered having to be a wild card. So that may end up being one of the reasons, there's no guarantees either way, that they don't get to the World Series. The other thing is that they don't have to re-sign Juan Soto and keep him long-term. They're going to try their hardest, but it's going to be difficult with Machado and with the situation with Tatis Jr., who clearly, obviously, a lot of money, right? So when you're thinking about those two scenarios, you can't have a house where you have all of your money into the kitchen and the bathroom because there's not going to be anywhere to sleep. So it's difficult to build a team where everything's all in 3 players. I don't know how that's going to pan out yet, but they still have 3 opportunities to make runs, and the Padres can't keep watching the Dodgers win the World Series. They can't. The Dodgers, 9, 10 division titles, right? 4 World Series. You can't do that. They needed to step up. AJ Preller did his job. No, look, I've been hard on him in the past. I don't think at times they've known whether or not they had a direction, buy or sell. There were some years there that were odd. You can only do what seems like the right deal at the time. It's the perception at the time of the deal. If Juan Soto gets hurt, if Josh Hader gives up saves, we can't then say, well, AJ Preller didn't do his job. And I think people too much relate it that way to just immediate performance. It's about the perception at the time of the deal. There's no guarantees after that. When he pulls this off the way he did, he should be given a pass. Now, guys in the field got to do it. Bob Melvin and his group got to get it done. They may not. That's baseball. But it's not going to be AJ Preller's fault.
Let's talk a little New York baseball. Being a Mets fan, I thought they'd do more. I thought getting Scherzer, of course, having him healthy now, getting DeGrom back the other night, of course, the 5 innings, the limited pitch count, the 5 strikeouts. He threw one of the pitches, I believe, was right around 100 miles an hour too at the
102.
knees.
102.
Holy
yeah.
crap. So great bats. Starling Marte has had a great year. Mark Canha is one of those guys that can fill in too as well. I like the Vogelback addition. Darren Ruff is a guy that can kind of fill in, play some multiple positions, and kind of fill out that lineup a little bit. Did you kind of like some of the moves they did? And I thought Steve Cohen and Brass would do more.
Yeah, I thought they'd do more. I like what they did. I mean, look, Vogelbach, they're 9-1 since they got him, and he just homered again yesterday. Him and Pete Alonso, it's like they're like Forrest and Jenny right now in Forrest Gump. I mean, it's the love affair. If there ever was a guy who's going to be a fan favorite in New York, just looking at Dan Vogelbach, you knew it would be him if he had any success. So he's very quickly becoming a fan favorite, and he's been great. I thought, the Givens edition was okay. I mean, he's been good for the Cubs this year. He's had, good success with the Orioles in the past, and Buck knows him. The Ruff edition and having a platoon at DH, it's okay. Look, the Giants used to do things like this all the time. Marco Scudero was like 87 years old when they added him at a deadline. Cody Ross was off of waivers. They never made big moves when they won the World Series those times. They had their guys, and they just tweaked a bit, and it worked. We'll see whether or not it works here. I think the Mets, they didn't fail because they didn't get Wilson Contreras, who they were in on. I think the Cubs were asking too much. They didn't fail because they didn't get Juan Soto, because they were never really in that much on Juan Soto. It's hard to say you don't need Juan Soto. Anybody would be better with him. But the Mets were 27, 28 games over 500, now 29 over, right? And in first place. They got a 4.5-game lead. I mean, let's not forget, this is how crazy it is. The Mets beat the Braves now, by the way, a bunch of times in a row in this past month. They also beat the Yankees twice. But if they were to take care of business this weekend, and Scherzer and DeGrom were both going, win 4 out of 5, the Mets might be 6.5 up in the division. I mean, at that point, and all of a sudden, it's a pretty decent gap. It's about the playoffs for the Mets. If I got Max Scherzer and Jacob DeGrom, and you don't, I feel pretty good about myself. If I get into a series. In a 5-game set, they may pitch 4 times. In a 7-game series, 5 starts, and then out of the bullpen, who knows where. Last time we saw something like Strasburg and Scherzer, when they beat your Astros 4 times. So, I'm just saying, and by the way, DeGrom better than Steven. So, this is the kind of thing that the Mets are trying to do. They're trying to win a division, and that's why you saw Buck Showalter go with 6-out save for Edwin Diaz. He's never done it in his career in a game in August, because it put him 4.5 up. The Mets brass feels if they get to a division win and they get to the postseason, they can win the World Series because of those 2 guys. And you know what? Who's going to tell them they can't?
Yeah.
They'll have a good shot.
Yeah. Let's stay in the National League. Of course, the Milwaukee Brewers, surprised at the Hader move a little bit. Of course, they knew he was going to command up team and arbitration with one more year of team control, but bringing back some great prospects there from the Padres, and of course getting a few pieces here and there. Give me your assessment there for Craig Counsell's ball club.
Yeah, look, I think the Brewers are always really smart this way, only because and I know they've lost a bunch of games here lately, and certainly the Pirates all of a sudden are like the boogeyman in their closet. But, having Devin Williams enables you to do this and to push down a step everybody that you have in that bullpen. Taylor Rogers has been terrible. Who knows what that's going to turn into? I was surprised they moved Hader. I was. But they have to try and give up an asset if they can get 3, because in that market, they have to handle themselves that way. They don't have a choice, right? So I was a little bit surprised. I also was surprised, I guess, overall, they didn't try and do more. However, I go back to a few years ago when they made the playoffs and made a decent run, and they had Drew Pomerantz and Jordan Lyles were the 2 big pickups. And I remember blasting him, like, what the hell is that? I don't think either gave up a run for 2 months.
Yeah.
So, I always say that the guy who leaves off the last S for savings, David Stearns, my cousin with an extra S, they've done a good job. But they're in trouble now if they don't start. Look, the Pirates beat them a bunch of times. The Cardinals are seemingly playing well a little bit now. And even though St. Louis didn't do a great job adding Quintana, I thought the Jordan Montgomery move was nice. They added some depth. I didn't really understand that from the Yankees. Bader's not – he's from the Bronx, but he's not going to play for a while. And, the Yankees are upgrading their defense in October, but Montgomery's a left-hander. Those guys don't grow on trees, and he's done a nice job for them. To bring him to the National League where you've got the Sotos and the Freddie Freemans and some of those names, even if he's out of the pen if the Cardinals made the playoffs, I thought the Montgomery move was a nice, small little move for St. Louis for sure.
And, of course, we talked a little bit about the West with the Padres. I want to talk a little Dodgers here, too, as well, because that's my National League team. I do root for L.A. It's just one of those things. But I will say there's a couple of guys coming up that have paid huge dividends already. James Outman, Miguel Vargas just the other night with a couple of hits there, too. Love watching the West Coast games there, too. Dodgers currently about 11.5 in front, or 12 in front of the Padres now, 72-33. Again, like you said, prospects, and sometimes they don't grow on trees. But when they do, the Dodgers know how to pick them off like cherries. But when they do that, it's always a great thing. Just to kind of assess Dave Roberts' ball club right now heading into the postseason, or the Dodgers the team to beat in the National League?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're the team to beat in the whole sport if Walker Buehler's healthy. Because the Clayton Kershaw situation, when you're dealing with a back, you never know when it's going to act back up, and it just did. A couple of days ago, he left the start early. We know he's not what he used to be, but they need him in there somewhere. How they're going to work in the guys who are kind of the extra starters and their young guys into the bullpen, we've seen them do that before. There's some decisions to be made there, but the Walker Buehler health situation I think is important because their lineup is clearly it's absurd. Like they didn't need Juan Soto. I got Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Trey Turner, Muncy. I mean, it's dumb. Honestly, it's really like this is like stupidity. The top of their lineup is like, are you kidding me? Like in our old days, we grew up, that would be like 3 through 6 in an all-star lineup. It's ridiculous. So I think they're in a good spot. But the Buehler health scenario, having him healthy and be successful, I think is huge. I really do. Because it comes down to pitching. At the end of the day, it comes down to pitching. And, is Urias their ace? I mean, it was different when he's pitching 3 innings and out of the bullpen to help win a World Series. Now being game 1, I mean, is that how they're going to go? The Mets, I think, would feel good if that's the case. Because with guys like Scherzer and DeGrom, I think Buehler is important for them. Watching his health and how all that plays out the rest of the year, I think is huge.
Definitely key for the Dodgers there. And I tell you what, back to the American League, look at the Central. Has become that 3-team race with the Twins, the Guardians, and the White Sox right there. A little surprised the White Sox didn't do more. I'm not sure what side Tony La Russa's on right now. One time he could be kind of into a ball game. The other day I saw a picture where his eyes were kind of closing asleep in the dugout. But from the Minnesota Twins standpoint, addressing the rotation behind Sonny Gray, bringing in Taylor Mahle from Cincinnati, and, of course, Jorge Lopez, the closer from the Baltimore Orioles, who's now the closer of the Minnesota Twins. I like it, Case, what the Twins did to separate themselves, but that's still a 3-team race.
Yeah, the Twins usually don't do anything. So for them to do something I thought was valuable. And I thought they did a nice job. Look, I like the Lopez move. I do. Yeah. And I think they did a good job improving. They got a couple of pen arms, improving the depth back there. I think they'll win the division. The problem is they can't beat the Yankees ever. I mean, literally ever. They're probably going to play them again, and they're going to lose to them again in the postseason. Like, not, It's just like preparing for. It's like the Titanic, watching the movie when you know what happens in the last 45 minutes. Is basically the Twins season if you're a fan. So yeah, you try and win the division. The White Sox, but that's what makes it so weird. Is the White Sox? Jerry Reinsdorf has money. They have prospects. They could have made a couple of big moves. They have what it takes to do it, right? The Twins don't have that. They don't have Jerry Reinsdorf's money. They don't have prospect. The White Sox just sat there. They did nothing. They fell asleep with Tony. So yeah. I can't really figure that out necessarily. And look, the Guardians, they've got some good players, a real good closer in the back end, but they are the example of how a Hall of Fame manager can show you the importance of coaching in this sport. Because when you think about how many things that franchise has gone through, and then try and count how many years with Terry Francona they're not in the mix, the answer is 0. They're in the mix every year. Every year they're like, nope, not this year. They don't have any money. They gave up. They sold. They lost Lindor. They're right there every time. They may not win it, but even a couple of years ago when the Twins won the division, they were right there with them with a month to go. It's amazing to me the job Tito's done with that team, but I think the Twins will win the Central.
Yeah, no doubt. It's going to be a 3-team race, very close and that kind of thing too. But I definitely love seeing a race considering there's not many divisions beside the NL Central and AL Central right now that you can say for yourself. You're going to have these teams, the top 2 seeds get a bye. What's your kind of thoughts, Casey, on this new playoff format? Of course, it gets other cities excited, gets them in there, but adding a playoff team per league.
I like it. I think the bye had to happen. I think because – the idea, I go back a couple of years ago in like the 60-game season, which is it's such a short – to sit there and see a team that is – it's such a high level, like the Dodgers, some of the years that they've had, and they could have 2 bad games and go home, right? To have them in a 3-game – it's not – I know the wild card, it sucks. The Pirates got screwed by it a couple of times. If they win an extra game, they don't lose to Arrieta in a wild card. They don't lose to Bumgarner. Maybe they win the division one of those years with McCutchen instead. I get that when you lose a division and get a wild card instead. But to go and be the number 1 seed and get 108 wins, and then I could face a team and in 2 days go home, I don't think that made sense. So to me, the bye for the high-end team was important. And it also makes it really interesting when you get teams that – and we could have this – where you've got a couple of teams that are right there neck and neck. We might have it in both leagues. And look, the way the Mets are playing right now, Mets and Dodgers may have this exact thing where, look, I want to get a bye, right? I mean, I don't just have a division against the Braves that I'm fighting with the Mets, but those are the top 3 teams. You might not only win a division, but also get a bye. Or your consolation prize is you get a wild card team in the Padres that are waiting for you. I don't want that. So I think you're going to see some teams push a little bit more down the stretch to get into that number 1, number 2 seed to be able to sit it out and wait for those teams to play out that first part, for sure.
Yeah, I love it too. And like you said, the excitement for the fans and, of course, people buying tickets and what baseball is all about, selling more hot dogs and more merchandise and more good stuff out there with souvenirs. It's always any sporting event out there loves that kind of stuff too, making all that money out there too. Well, I tell you, this is going to be a fun time for baseball, no doubt. Of course, the extra playoff team, the trade deadline too. Was there one team that you kind of felt, we talked about a couple of them, but was there one team more that you're kind of saying to yourself in contention? I know the Orioles were kind of a little bit we don't want to move Mancini, a little bit cautious here and there, but they're 3.5 out of a wild card race. They could be early right now for a wild card spot, but you kind of expect a team, maybe like the Orioles who are in the race, that you kind of felt like, you know what, that GM should have made more phone calls. We should have acquired more players.
I was surprised the Giants didn't make a choice. Outside of the Darren Ruff deal, like I was surprised they didn't choose to sell, and by the way, they just got swept again. They've now lost 8 in a row to the Dodgers. That ownership, give them credit. They don't ever want to give up. That's why they gave Marco Scutaro, when he was 80, a 3-year deal after they won the World Series, because they're just very loyal and they're loyal to that fan base. They don't want to give up. Remember a few years ago, Boch had that group for the last time. They weren't going to do anything even if they made the playoffs, but he wouldn't trade any of those guys. He didn't want to move Bumgarner. He didn't, right in his last year. He didn't want to move Brandon Crawford on a good year. He didn't want to move Brandon Belt. Didn't want to do any of that. I was surprised Farhan didn't convince that ownership to sell, because Carlos Rodon, to me as a rental, would have brought in a haul. Even though he's a rental, he had come off his best start of the year. He's left-handed. I think he's better than Montas and Castillo when he's at his best, because he's lefty in the postseason. I was surprised. Jock Peterson, look what he did last year. Look what he did with the Dodgers. He's become one of these guys in this game that's now we know a postseason stud. You could have packaged Rodon and Jock Peterson to a place like the Yankees before they got Benintendi, and imagine the kind of money you could have made. So, I'm surprised that they didn't bring in prospects and assets for some of their guys and just stuck it out because they're not going to do anything. And those guys, and Rodon's going to be gone.
He is. He's going to be a free agent. He'll get a multi-year deal somewhere else. Let me ask you about this because this has been the talk of baseball the entire year. 15-3 with a 1.73 ERA, aging like a fine wine is Justin Verlander. What more adjectives can we put out there than holy crap?
Yeah, I mean, if Hall of Fame was some kind of way to be an adjective, I mean, I think it would be Justin Verlander. And it's amazing, too, because I go back to, I remember having a conversation with him at, I think it was a golf tournament I was doing for Sirius XM, actually, where he was out there, and it was the year after all the injuries and everybody had said that he was done. And he was talking about going through the first off season being healthy and not having to rehab anything going. And then eventually it turned into the year in which he gets traded in 2017 and the rest is history. People thought he was done. Let's not forget, people thought he was done. I mean, Justin Verlander, to be able to, and I think, look, Adam Wainwright's in this category differently, but in this category, Scherzer at this age, and these guys who are finding different ways to adjust with their stuff, find a way to adjust in their workout routines to make sure that they can keep their arms as strong. And you need some luck too, right? For him to come back after the injury and still want to play, it's hard for me to understand. He'd done everything he could ever do in this sport, right? Why not walk off into the sunset? But guys like that don't do that. And now you see why. Because now when he walks off on his own terms, think about how different the end of this story is going to be for Verlander.
And, of course, reaching that clause of 130 innings in his contract now, which is a player option, he's probably going to decline that and get a 2 or 3 year multi-year deal. I know this case, Houston ownership, he's best friends with Jim Crane and that front office. I think Houston has to do whatever it can to keep Verlander in an Astros uniform, and I think that's going to be definitely a key thing is keeping him, 40, 41, 42. We saw Nolan Ryan, the Express, go to 44, 45 years old and be a 324-game winner too as well. This guy just won number 241 last night against the Guardians. So, like you said, fine wine and getting this guy under contract in Houston. You really can't put a number on it because now you got to give him what he wants after this year because here's a clear front runner for the American League Cy Young Award winner, right?
Look, without a doubt, I think there are certain relationships that have to continue. And at some point, if they win the World Series, he's going to be able to do whatever he wants. And look, for guys like that, we are blessed to be able to watch them play and to watch these careers. And when you've got DeGrom, Scherzer, and Verlander, just to name 3, those are 3 of the best pitchers of all time. And they're all pitching right now. So enjoy it while it's there. I've got to run, and I hate doing it because Tennessee is calling.
You're good, brother. Get on to that next one, too.
Not the volunteers to play quarterback. They're not calling me to play quarterback anything.
Case, we appreciate the time. Hey, tell people where they can find the podcast. Unfiltered on the Believe Network, right?
Unfiltered on the Believe Network. You can get me at Casey Stern on Twitter. Find out all the information. Please reach out, follow, and get involved. Brandon, much love, buddy. Be well.
Hey, brother, we'll be in touch over the next few months. The one and the only Casey Stern here on the SportsGuysPodcast.com. Stay tuned for more 4 o'clock. Deborah Allen coming up too as well. We'll talk to Casey later on. Till then, have a great weekend.